Right, we will get started. Thank you for coming. I'll call this meeting to order, the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County, April 20th. We will roll into some unfinished business. I have the approval of the minutes from March 16th, 2023. Do I hear a motion for that approval? Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor of the approval of those minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, next piece of unfinished business is a continued discussion of our wastewater capacity allocation. That's an alternative methods. Michael, you want to sort of reframe the discussion a little bit?
Okay. I think at the last meeting, Jeff had brought up allocating an additional 20,000 to Mount Pleasant. In addition to the 5-year low averages. Went back and used the different methods, allocating it between all the parties and just allocating it all to Concord. And on that spreadsheet I attached, I included what the change in debt service for each jurisdiction would be. Basically, as a reference. Just keep in mind that for every 1,000 gallons, the debt service is around, just rounded, about $2,000. For every 10,000 gallons, it's about $20,000. 100,000 will be 200,000, and the million will be about $2 million. So as we trade off capacities and look at it, that's an easy way to keep in mind the impact of each jurisdiction and what would happen if we trade off capacities, or someone gives up capacity, or if we go share the capacity. So on the agenda, attached to my agenda page, where the calculation at the bottom of the page shows differences in the service using that.
Any thoughts?
Well, the only thing I'll add, I talked to Mount Pleasant a little bit, and I guess one of the issues that's pushing, I guess, my head to lean this way is there's a county project. It's a park, senior center, library. That I think, what's the timeline?
I think they're getting pretty close to
soon.
Yeah.
And right now, those sewer numbers are about 20,000 gallons on that project. So when you look at their numbers, Mount Pleasant is getting 29,000. The county project will take 20 of that. So that's sort of the 20 in my head is, could we all contribute to that project that they, that I think as a community, we all, generally support those types of projects. So I just throw out that clarification of that 20, and I'm sure they'd love to have more than just that 20, but I feel that if we could somehow help them cover that project to where they still have the ability, I mean, they'd be left with less than 10,000 after that county project. And I certainly don't want to put them in the position where they're having to, obviously that allocation will have to come from Mount Pleasant, but certainly don't want to put them in the situation to have to weigh the county project and a private. I mean, that's a tough place to land.
Mike and I had a sort of email exchange earlier today about some of this, and we could take that whole concept a step further. I don't know if we want to do this, but we all have county projects that are in our jurisdictions. We have schools, and we have a variety of things.
The library senior center
At Afton. We have the behavioral health center in Kannapolis. We have, so we have a bunch of expansion projects, and one potential thought, and this could get really complicated, but is that we revamp these numbers. So we all take some capacity out of all that, and we take that off the top. And that's just, WSACC gives that directly to the county. And we all participate in that, including the one in Mount Pleasant. So That's a potential, because otherwise, we're all, it's count, it's for some of these things, it's countywide support and services. So we all should sort of chip in no matter where it's located in the county. It gets a little dicier though. There's some that are more local than others. Schools, for instance, you could have a school that is in the middle of Concord that only 95% of Concord citizens and their kids go to that school, but could be one on the edge that it covers 3 jurisdictions. So we could go down some slippery slopes here, maybe, but it's just a thought. It's building on what you said, Jeff.
I mean, I like that. I really, in principle, I love the idea, honestly, because I do. When these numbers get tighter and tighter, I mean, at the end of this 3-4 years, however long this piece is gonna last, I mean, there's gonna be some really tough decision making for really good public projects included in that. I mean, right now, we're picking between private and you kind of weighing the needs, but that's gonna get really hard when there's a elementary school in that pot and it's gonna get bad.
Well, we talked about the new Northwest Cabarrus High School. Clearly, there's students that come from Concord and Kannapolis and unincorporated parts of the county that will go to that high school. Should we all chip in there? Mount Pleasant and Harrisburg have zero benefit from that school, but where do you draw the line? And that may be too much to get.
But West Cabarrus may be a better example in the sense that caused redistricting at Robinson, Cox Mill, Concord. The waves went all the way through the county by the time you looked at that school.
That's a good way of looking at it. So.
Well, I also think we already in Concord do, we've got buckets, single family, multifamily, commercial. And we actually do this in Concord where when we have a public project that comes before us, it is taken because our allocation comes in and it goes into those buckets by percentage. But then when a public project comes in, it's actually taken off across the board because we feel like it's a participatory thing, exactly what you're saying. I think it would be difficult to, I think it would almost be a yes or a no. I think it would be difficult to start going down roads of like, well, does this one fit? Does it not fit? Because you could also argue a library, right? Like, well, I'm going to drive to my library. I'm not going to drive to Jim's library, but it's benefiting the public purpose, right, of what it is. And I think it's a great idea. And I think it's something that I think we'd have to have a deadline on it to make sure that the municipalities and we know the impact, right, that it's having as we're delving in.
Well, and some of this, it could drive county decisions too.
Sure.
There could be, we get the final list and say, I'm sorry,
Sure.
we collectively don't think there's enough sewer to do all this in this time frame, and then the county may have to. I keep looking at Jonathan.
Oh, that's fine. No, I just, when you want to communicate that a school can't be built, Lynn and I both want you to go to school.
Deliver that message.
Even if I'm retired.
But there could be parks though, parks aren't big water users, so it's generally, so you don't have a big deal, but anyway.
And really, schools are not as big a water user
They're
as
not.
I think they are.
Right. They're not.
It's
So
the allocation is higher than the actual usage, so once they come on, they want to free up a lot of capacity, but the way that the per unit regs set up for each toilet's 250 gallons, whether it's 1 flush a day or 10.
And I think that's part of what's driving this issue in Mount Pleasant. First of all, that you have a very limited amount of allocation to provide. It's difficult to calculate on a library, senior center and park together, and it has to be done on what that higher number. I don't think it's gonna be near 19,000, but at the same, and Aaron, I think is trying to help. Aaron Burr's trying to help our designers with how they go about calculating it. So we can drive that down, but it's still
Well,
a
if-
big number for Mount Pleasant.
if we're all phasing and telling the private sector that to phase, we could force ourselves to phase, meaning all the municipalities in the county to phase our own public improvements. I mean, this whole thing is really about growth management anyway, so we may have to bite the bullet and say, you can't do it all in the first 3 years or no, so.
So the idea would be to try to get a good list from the county then,
I think that's the next step.
with some timelines on when they think they're gonna go.
Get Chad comfortable with the numbers, the impacts, and and we bring back what that looks like. And timing, best the county knows, this is the impacts, and then see what that number looks like for the full next decade.
Well, if you build, if we, with that number, again, we don't know exactly what that's gonna, but what's been given, you can build, you get the park and you get 145 homes, that's it. Or you get the park and a new church and 45 homes, and that's it. And, you know, when everybody else is blooming, because of Charlotte and everything, the growth over here, now we're getting that opportunity, but we're having to turn stuff down, and which is, you got to, I mean, we're doing efforts, we're putting a new water line, we're putting the interceptor line up there for the sewage. Up at, what's the name of that interceptor line? Adams Creek, yeah. So we're doing a lot to try to get it, and, you know, we're gonna have to look at a tax base that's we're trying to grow it, so we don't have to go down the road to get a humongous tax increase, our tax rate for the pound. And that, I'm not picking on you, but that number came out, I'm like, wow, I mean, take 19,000 out of 29,000. It's nothing. I mean, what could y'all do with 19,000 gallons? You can do nothing.
William and I did have some discussion about if we did something like this, how the mechanics would work. William had said, I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, and I think you guys were already kind of generally talking about it, but you know, our thought preliminarily was, you know, that would actually go to the county. Because we need to allocate it somewhere. Because this concept had actually come up before we entered the interlocal agreement, because at that time there was, should WSACC have a pot for these municipal county projects? And the idea was, you know, we couldn't do that. We couldn't just earmark that as WSACC. So at that time, we contemplated various things, ended up going through the interlocal agreement, and that solved that. But we've done this before, kind of got a list of these projects. Now we need an updated list. But the idea would be, let's get the numbers as close to being set as we can, and then that would get allocated to the county. And then the municipalities still make the decisions on the projects, but it's coming out of this county thing. And that would be all wrapped up into our new interlocal agreement that we know we're gonna have to do anyway. That's on the horizon here in the short term, because none of this actually really comes up. What I'm hearing is like, until we allocate the next time, unless we're gonna take away from everybody. I don't think that's the plan. I think it's whenever we have allocation to allocate out, then that's when it would go to the county.
2 million one,
Yeah,
Well, but that's what this whole table's based on, right?
the 2 million one.
that's right. So then, so say that's 70,000 gallons for, and I'm just making a number up, but say that's what it's determined to be based on schools, libraries, whatnot. Then that would go to the county first off the top, and then you would divvy up the rest based on the percentages that we agreed to.
Anybody have any concerns about this course of action, any pitfalls anybody sees?
And we would want to, you know, look into that more. That's just kind of off the cuff of, you know, just spending the last day kind of noodling around.
How do the debt service numbers work with that?
Well, that's the question.
The county pays for some debt service.
That's what I
Do
heard.
we have a motion on the table?
You look at this.
I would think as it's allocated out that we would always assume that they would be the customers of the jurisdiction. So they would pick up that percentage as it's. And just be ignored, I guess, mainly, and be picked up when that we start billing out the bills, but yeah, that's a complicating factor.
Yeah, we just talked about that. Yeah,
How that would actually work.
it's just a timing thing.
So would that number that would be allocated to the county only be non-EDC locations? Because didn't we say that we don't have any authority to allocate for economic development, that only the municipalities have the authority to do that? So
Somewhere between those two.
I'm confused a little bit about where that goes. So what happens if somebody comes and there's a mega site that's just in the county and they need 300,000 gallons and it's not in any of the municipalities? Is it come out of that same fund? Do they?
This would be, no, I mean, that would be a whole different thing. I mean, this is contemplated just for kind of governmental projects.
That's what I was
Yes.
assuming we were talking about.
Libraries.
But I just want to make sure that that doesn't include any other
economic
No,
development project,
Yeah,
because obviously that's gonna have to come out from all of us.
That's
I'm
right.
Assuming before that's.
yeah, that would be a whole different conversation. This would truly be a project and Mike has a list, a preliminary list right now of what those projects are. And I think a lot of them we've already talked about, but it's the Mount Pleasant Park Library, it's the Afton Village Library, it's the Northwest Cabarrus High School. I think there's 3 or 4 things more on there, including a couple county buildings.
There's a public safety training complex at Stonewall Jackson. And then a new DHS building that hasn't been decided yet.
And then the behavioral one, which I
And the
think is
health
in Kannapolis.
out at
And then
Cardinal Building.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure that the EDC project you described, that would ever, I can't foresee, at least with the current policies and procedures, that you'd ever have one that would be an unincorporated. And that's not to say that wouldn't be, but everything like that it's been
Generally annexed.
required voluntary annexation.
I think that's even more true because the county doesn't get into billing business and all of those things. So it's likely to be the municipality would incorporate, engulf that into a municipality.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that we weren't thinking that that pot's going to have enough money in it for some kind of big EDC project along the way. Because that's going to then cut the number way down for all the rest of us to share.
In our meeting on Monday, we approved an economic development incentive for the dry ice company in Midland. Wonder what their capacity is gonna be, do you know? Mike?
Muddy Creek is separate. They currently have about,
Will that be on Muddy Creek? Will that be on the Muddy Creek system where they're wanting to build out in 24, 27? It's like a $60 million project.
it's on 20.
I'm not aware of it.
We're not aware of that project, so we're not sure where it's sited, but
You said dry ice, Lynn? Is that what you said it
Dry
was?
ice. Yeah, they needed railway for the Aberdeen. Runs right by that property, but it's on West 24, 27. And the DHS building that we were talking about, that might be off the paper for right now. We're looking at other options. Just for whatever that's worth.
Any other discussion or thought?
I suspect that dry ice building project may have a fairly substantial demand for water because you're super cooling CO2. And in order to get it down there, you're gonna have some cooling towers in order
See, I
to
don't
do
know,
it.
and they didn't, and Paige and them didn't tell us about the water, the capacity for the allocation, so I don't know, but that obviously it will affect.
I don't know that I'm aware of it
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
Which,
it wouldn't be near the air gas company down there.
Yeah, that's certain, yeah, it's out close to that.
They're gonna use the reservoir.
Well, I don't know. It's a pretty big business, so it's a homegrown business, they're homeless. And they had like a mom and pop type operation and they're really getting super expansion there.
We'll check with Paige and see where.
Yeah, she can tell you all, but maybe all that.
So is that in the town of Midland?
It'll be in that jurisdiction, yeah. That's the first economic development package they've ever had, they said, that we incentivized. And they didn't incentivize it, by the way. They said their tax rate was low enough already.
Only for the day. Won't be long.
Two of these projects are at the Rob Wallace Park, which will eventually go to the Muddy Creek plant on the list of projects to be done. That doesn't impact the allocation we're talking.
So we don't have a real good guess at a percentage of sewer capacity that public projects.
Yeah, I've got projects. I don't have any flow information other than the Mount Pleasant one, which was almost 20,000.
So we don't even have a guess at how much.
I mean, I think it's safe to say it's under 100,000, but I don't know whether it's 40 or 75 or but I would say it's under 100.
I think the goal is to have a better numbers at the May meeting that's present to you guys.
I'm not sure if they're even designed enough.
Yeah, they might not be.
Estimate of flow.
For instance, the Northwest High School replacement, which because the other one's gonna stay open, it is all new flow.
Right.
That one, they're gonna just look at West Cabarrus can tell you what it is, but. The library senior centers seem to be difficult just to calculate. And then at a park.
Use things, you end up being very conservative if you're not careful.
Yeah, we have a calculation here on the number of restrooms, toilets and sinks. For that one. Yeah.
Randy Holloway's here from Mount Pleasant. Randy, do you still, is there anything you want to add? And if,
I just wanted to encourage you, Mr. Chair, to do exactly what you're doing and continue to discuss this. I did bring a number to share tonight. I don't have any kind of presentation, but just based on what we currently have in some level of planning, we're under 39,873 gallons in the deficit. Now, 20,000 of that is the Virginia Fall Park. So all of our projects are one little small spreadsheet. So our projects are small compared to all of you folks, but 29,000 gallons is not going to go very far, particularly if we have to start right out of the gate with taking 20 of that for the park, which we very much appreciate serving Eastern Cabarrus County. But I didn't know if you were voting tonight, if you were still discussing. So I'm very pleased to see that you're still discussing this, and I want to make a presentation to my board at the May meeting, and if I could at least send y'all some information that we're going to present to our board and say absolute bare bones minimum. We understand the situation that everybody's in. What is the bare bones that we can live with? Again, we're already almost 40,000 short based on the 65,000 that we have under the current agreement. And those are just some small projects that are currently on the books.
So Randy, the 40,000 that you're short includes the 20,000 that is for that park.
Yes, so that goes away, then we're 20,000
Okay.
short. Yes, all right.
we are all in the same boat on having deficits or having not enough capacity, but it's exponentially different with a smaller amount.
And I do think it's a wise move to look at doing some allocation for those county projects would be a smart move.
Thanks for the input.
William, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
William, do we have to then redo our interlocal agreement in order to create this?
Yeah, we do, but
Money?
my sense is, I mean, is some of it a question of timing as when these are gonna come online that is gonna need towards them. We are gonna be in the process of the next anyway of updating the interlocal, because the interlocal right now just gets us to 26.5. And so we already know we're, so the idea would be, ideally, this could just get folded into that. So we're already amending or restating the interlocal agreement, and at that time, we address this. We know the time period here gets slower in that even once this board approves the interlocal agreement, it obviously has to go back out to all the municipalities of the county.
That's what I was thinking.
So this is not something that's gonna be done in May or June, I think some of that, maybe that's a question too of these projects is not only finding out the anticipated flow, but like when they would be coming to request a flow allocation.
Have we heard anything else from Diener on a further reduced flow? I mean, I think they brought it down considerably, but I think we were trying to get a lower flow.
They can give you update on the legislation that.
Right, so we worked very closely with DEQ, Home Builders Association, Rural Water, Senator Newton, his staff, and others to craft the Senate Bill 463, which is currently being run through right now. That lowers actually amends the 2T rules to lower the 120 gallons per bedroom to 75 gallons per bedroom. We're currently at 80 gallons per bedroom, so it provides a nominal increase to us to go from 80 to 75. I do think we made some progress in getting DEQ to better understand that the conservatism when they look at actual flow data and they're starting to look at, well, we have to factor in what this subdivision may produce 40 years from now. Like, no, you don't, because that's going to be in the real flow number. That we're only worried about year one. That's it. So there's a tentative agreement right now that we're gonna try to work through with WSAC, Charlotte Water, maybe Concord, Home Builders Association, some groups coming together in a collaboration of 5-6 entities to do a study on what does a new bedroom actually produce, whether it's in a single family home, whether it's in a townhouse, whether it's an apartment, what does it actually produce year one? And I could imagine that taking a look at surveying the fixtures and their volumes, actual water usages, doing some actual sewer monitoring of several new apartment complexes, residential subdivisions as they're being built, and being able to put together a package that we can go back to DEQ with a very broad-based group of partners supporting it and have funded it, to say, listen, I know you're worried about being conservative, but the real number's like 40, or 35 or 45 or whatever that number is. Because we know our real number is 45 if you look across the course of a year. Well, that includes everything. If you look at just new construction, it should be lower than that. I think it's reasonable to assume. So I think there's going to be some work to take place in that, and maybe hopefully get that number moved even further down. The biggest benefit it provides for us in the past, we had to calculate a 1-bedroom as 2 bedrooms. So a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom apartment was calculated at 160 gallons for that unit. We will now be able, if this passes, to calculate at 75 gallons. So that's almost 100 gallons on every 1-bedroom that is permitted. And as we know, those are becoming more and more prevalent due to cost and due to the type of structures that are being built now. So that's a benefit. The last one is really beneficial to us, in that it will allow you within 36 months of completing your expansion project that is funded and construction's underway, and you're meeting milestones, you can permit up to 110% of your plant capacity. Then 24 months, you can permit up to 115%, as long as that's not more than the size of your expansion. So our expansion is like a 12% expansion, I believe, or something and like that. So we will be able to permit the full 3.5 NGD now, because we're less than 24 months from completion. That will really help us on the next expansion, because within that will essentially mean in, say, 2024, we can start permitting that next 4 MGD. And start being able to give actual flow acceptance letters to individuals. So that provides the most flexibility for us to have access to that, with maybe not having to be as detailed and phasing some of these projects, just having a little more freedom with that. So
Is that bill in committee yet?
I'm not sure if it is or not. Do you know?
I don't know. We feel pretty good about it. Chad's taking the lead talking to Senator Newton, and he actually gave me an update today too, and it's sounding positive. There's a part of that bill that talks about interbasin transfer. That part is controversial. So there's talk that maybe that gets dropped out of the bill, and it's just more focused on the wastewater, which that would be good for us, because we would love to see this obviously go through in the next couple of months, and the interbasin stuff threatens to kind of derail it a little bit.
And there was early discussion among everybody whether to try to separate this, and the desire was, let's see if we can get this through as one package. I think everyone recognized up front that that was going to be the more hot button issue. So overall, I don't know that we hit it out of the park. Hitting out of the park, we thought we had DEQ verbally committed to 60 gallons per day per bedroom, and they did a survey and established that would be the lowest state in the country, and they didn't want to set that precedence. And somebody has to do it. The numbers back
Say
it up.
lead.
Yeah, the numbers back it up. And but we settled at 75, and having access to that, allocating that capacity prior to completion is obviously a win. So overall, it was an interesting experience. That's for sure.
But isn't that allowable capacity for the expansion? I thought that was kind of like an agreement between us and DEQ. Is this part of the legislation, or
It was.
we still kind of broker that
It was, but that was not as clearly cut laid out. This will be laid out that it's your capacity to permit, just as if it's existing capacity that is built, you know, that it's not. And that you had to permit it, but you had to write into your allocation that all these restrictions that it couldn't come on before the plant was expanded and all of that stuff. That would be streamlined there, and it would be treated as a regular flow acceptance.
And that was like a smaller number too. That probably might have been like 5% or
Yeah,
something like that. Whereas this, like I said, it's like 12%. I mean, we could gone up to 15, but we don't, our expansion's only 12%. But the next time around, I think we probably can go up to, you know, closer to 15%. Cause it'll be a bigger expansion and we'll have more capacity already.
And does this bill just apply to fast growing counties, or does it apply to all counties in the state?
It's being pointed towards fast growing.
I know that's what Senator Newton had said originally. He would like to have a special set of regulations for fast growing counties.
And we tried to word that in a way that it ensured that Cabarrus County stayed in that.
I think it's like 2% annual growth or something. There's 2% is the number.
Any other questions for Chad? Mike? Okay.
I just have a comment. We're getting some feedback from our board that time is of the essence, because we're trying to not see a huge lag. Like, we're out of capacity, right? And so now we're kind of, okay, no more sewer allocation meetings. And so I know that there's interlocal and we got a lot of steps to take. And then if we're adding this, I guess I would just ask from a jurisdiction perspective, from a municipal perspective, of that the longer it takes, I want to get it right, but the longer it takes, it's crippling us, you know, from a standpoint. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way. Like, we're not giving out past 2024. So that's the decision that the council has made. And so we're ready for the 1.2 or whatever that might be. And so just kind of feedback from that perspective. It would be amazing if we did it right, but we know there's what do they call it? Time is of the essence.
Right. And to
Call it
support what you're
state.
saying, Senator Newton feels very strongly that you don't want to see that growth stop, because it's hard to get it back stopped. It's hard to get it back started. And I think the push is that this gets passed within its month or two. It's not next year. It's not in the future. It's soon. So I do think that it would behoove our community to be ready for that when that becomes available, just to show appreciation and support for that effort.
Okay. All right. We'll Michael, you'll get the list together. You and Chad will work on the flow. And timing, I think, is critical on when these projects, best we know now, best the county knows now, when they're going to hit the books, and then we can have continuous discussion at the next meeting, see where it goes. Chad?
One more thing, because I think you recommended it in your email. Another option would be, this is like Concord does, is to create a bucket under the county that say we put 40,000 gallons in. As a project comes up, we pull it out of that pot, and then during our next 6-month update, we have to do every 6 months, we refill that bucket back to a size that's big enough to kind of cover what may be the biggest project that you would see. I don't think we would rarely see more than one in a 6-month period. I think that they're going to be kind of spaced out, and we can kind of anticipate that, but we could handle that through at that 6-month update. Just part of that update is saying, hey, well, this project or these two projects took 8,000 gallons out of this bucket. We had to refill that. So this is how it affected each jurisdiction. I think it would always be pretty small, so it wouldn't hopefully ever really have a major impact to anyone. But instead of trying to create a list of anticipating the next 5 or 6 years needs and when they're going to happen and how much capacity something's going to take when it's not been fully designed yet, and you end up putting more capacity there than maybe is needed for the next couple of years that the other jurisdictions could be utilizing, it may be a way to look at that. And we can look at that both ways.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I think we need to understand the big picture as a group, what that looks like over the course of the next several years. But then I like the approach of not actually allocating it except every 6 months when there's an actual project. But we just know that there's this larger number out there over the course of several years that we're dealing with. So, Because we're trying to look at ours holistically over the next 7 years and allocate it to development that we know is already there. It's all just conditioned on a whole host of things, and developers know that. So we're taking a little different approach than Concord. We're allocating it much further than that, but it's all at risk because we don't know what it looks like. But
We
So I
haven't
think
had a lot
big
of
picture's
bites on
in
that. We haven't had a lot of bites on that from a financial standpoint of people willing to take the risk on it, so.
most of
it's-
ours is large projects that are phased, that they're willing to
Yeah,
do that, but so. Okay, good. Any other thoughts or-
I'm
Yeah.
curious, how long do you think it's gonna take to get the numbers together? In order to try to accomplish what Jennifer was asking about? Is there a possibility you'll have it in 2 weeks or so that you can share it with everybody? And could we have a call meeting if we required that? Will 2 weeks make a difference, Jennifer, I guess?
well, I
Before
mean,
we-
if it's next meeting, that's great. I just would like to
Okay.
have, I mean, if we feel like.
No need to worry
Hey,
about
this
it.
is what we're doing, that kind of thing. I know that then William said, okay, then we got it, and then we're at June, and then we got, because we still got to go through these interlocal agreements, which I know those take a little bit of time.
Howell, the county is very responsive to our request. I mean, same day, just about always. So we can get these numbers together pretty quick.
Sounds good.
Because he doesn't sleep. He doesn't sleep.
I've heard that.
All right, we will move on to new business. Mike, you want to talk to us about our fixed charges for the coming year? Variable and
Can I
fixed,
ask one
yes.
more? I'm sorry, I asked this because I apologize, I did miss the last meeting. So have we agreed on these percentages from a standpoint of 5-year average? Because I know that was another thing.
And we didn't have any discussion about that
Okay.
just now, so.
Okay.
um,
Sorry, don't mean to derail
No,
the train,
no,
but
no.
I guess that's part of this whole. If we're putting this piece on and then that piece on too, it'd be great to kind of have that shored up if we're at that point.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of got sidetracked with this issue, which was good discussion. But
Absolutely.
we didn't spend any time, you're right, on, is that the right formula still going forward? On how the balance is allocated, are we still basing it on,
5-year average.
5-year average, or is there a more appropriate? And I don't know if our staff has any strong opinions about whether that's right or wrong, or if anybody else does.
Well, if we're gonna pull it out of the pot, are we gonna allocate? Guess the real question, are we gonna allocate any additional capacity in the jurisdiction above
The only alternative,
the county projects?
yeah, well, let's say the county projects are taking off, and then whatever the balance is, we got to figure out how to distribute. The only alternative to the 5-year average I can see is based on the master plan. That puts a lot of faith in a projection.
That's right.
And if we're comfortable with the projection is the right way to go, and everybody's good with that, then we can do that. But that's the only other number I think we could hang our hat on. That's just my opinion. Not sure we could come up with anything else other than where we think we're going in the next 7 years versus where we've been. That's probably more accurate where we're going, but not the real numbers. I mean, in theory, it's more accurate. But in practice, you're just basing it on what may or may not happen. So I don't know. That's my only 2 cents to the question.
I don't have enough confidence in the master plan timing and projects to recommend using that. Do you, Chad? I mean, there's just so many variables.
There is, so I mean, it's hard to, I mean, there's a lot of effort going into that process and a lot of, it is definitely being backed up by actual data and a lot of effort. So I mean, I think you feel as good as you can about it. And I do think we have proof back to the last master plan to this one that they did pretty well. The new numbers followed pretty well. So it's definitely something we can do. I do find that being a potential thing that could slow up this process a little bit of looking at it that way and trying to reach agreement with involving that master plan and trying to do this in a timely manner.
Is it too complicated to have a 2-factor approach and you take a percentage, you take sort of a merger of historical averages plus some formula that includes a look forward in the master plan? Some sort of hybrid, that's probably too complicated, but maybe.
Yeah, I think my concern with that master plan, I mean, we all just assumed the timing of things, right? And I think some jurisdictions assumed very rapid development and some looked at more long-term. So my struggle would be the consistency of what is the real world timing, right? If the jurisdiction that really spread that growth out all of a sudden had a big pressure all of a sudden versus the one that front loaded it all, but maybe has not seen the explosive growth there. I mean, it doesn't I think we would struggle, just based on timing.
The other thing is cost. Based on cost. Where's cost gonna be on some of these projects 2 years from now versus where we're estimating they're really gonna be?
This interlocal agreement update, is that for just for the up to the 30 million, or is that anticipated to be? Look at the 34 also.
I mean, that would ultimately be at your decision, but you know, I think I was contemplating it up to the 30.
So that's what I say. So maybe using the 5-year averages at this point, but as we continue to develop this and the master plan is adopted, start looking at some other methods.
I like that because I think by the time we do this again. For that last piece, we're gonna know a lot more about timing and scoping of what that, that's the big unknown. What's that next expansion? What's that next capacity and how far off is it? Is it?
And I think
2
we'll
years
actually
later.
revisit it fairly soon. I mean, this is gonna be and we knew this going in. And right now it goes to 26.5. I envision an amendment, restatement going to 30. Then pretty soon though, we'll need to go ahead and do to the 34 because hopefully this bill goes through the General Assembly and we be able to go ahead and start allocating out the 30 to 34 in the next hour bit of time here. So that the idea would be this is one step and then we're going to be right back here a year from now or whenever that time period will be.
During that process, we're going to be considering adoption of the new master plan.
Right. Yeah. So that makes, there's more than one bite of the apple here. Yeah.
Have we done any thinking or modeling what we think the 5-year average is going to, what the impact on the 5-year average is going to be as we go forward in the next years? And maybe I'm wrong, I'm trying to get a feel for it. Randy was saying he needed 40,000. But you and us, we're talking in terms of hundreds of thousands. So if he had all he needed for 40,000, would that change the ratio of the percentages very much? Or are the percentages going to stay the same as we go forward from one year to the next to the next? Or is because Concord has got the head start on Ball and all the other big projects over there, does that mean the numbers are going to skew in the favor of Concord and Kannapolis because we're growing fairly rapidly too? And is that going to make things even more difficult in the future if we stay with the 5-year average? I've got my Kannapolis hat completely off right now while I'm talking about this because I'm asking, what do we expect the 5-year average to be like next year and 2 years and 3 years down the road? Is it because Kannapolis and Concord's numbers are so huge because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of gallons? Is that going to skew the number? And is that going to make Randy and Jim's problem even worse? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? No, even though we're going to get more water, even more sewer capacity. Is that percentage going to change fairly dramatically and do that?
It is restricted by like the amount of 29,000. It's not gonna change because you're not getting more because there's not more pot to pull from.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at what does that number look like 3 years from now?
Well, I think
Is-
Harrisburg kind of fell into that category.
They actually,
Zero growth.
Yeah,
They didn't take on any more capacity.
right.
And I think that in the long run, they're probably kind of penalized for that.
well, they actually went up
Percentage went up.
9% to about 10% in this
Percentage
last
went up.
5-year average. I don't know whether it's rain related or stress related.
I guess I'm asking, does any of that have anything to do with whether or not we want to hang our hat onto a 5-year rolling average? I don't know the answer. I have sat here all along and thought to myself, what happens with this rolling average 2 years from now? Is all of a sudden Concord's got 63% instead of 59%? And we've got whatever the number of increase is because we are throwing stuff out there quick and as quickly as we possibly can. Is that going to make the changes?
So in theory, if you are allocating capacity based off of percentages of what 5-year actual flow is, then those numbers in theory are going to stay very close to each other. Because if you're getting 30% of the capacity and someone else is getting 50% of the capacity and someone else is getting 1% of the capacity, well, you only have that much, that 1, 2%, 10%, 30% to grow.
If you use it.
If you
Yeah.
use it. So in theory, the person that uses their capacity the quickest and those units get connected the quickest, their actual flow is going to go up. And then they're going to get reallocated the 30% of capacity it was made available because it doesn't use as much as it actually did. And so you've got the potential that you could gain ground if you're building things quickly.
But still using the same percentage.
Still, well, the percentage would change slowly over time if you're bringing stuff online, but you're talking about relatively small changes.
And that's,
with that.
well, that's true for Concord and Kannapolis.
Yes.
But a slight, a 1% for both of us is devastating for Mount Pleasant.
That's the
because-
point I'm making. I mean, the
Correct.
point Mike just made better than what I made is if we both increase 1%, he goes 100,000 negative instead of that because he's not going to have anything if we gobble it all up and have an extra 1% of growth.
And I know, I know we have a chart of the 5-year historical 5-year averages. And if I remember right, Concord is actually dropping, which not to say the last 5 years reflects where we currently are. I mean, you know, things change really fast, but because I would agree with you, but the data seems to show.
But again, they're small incremental drops. They're not
Right.
3 and 4 and 5%. It's
But
1%,
that
right?
also includes data that was approved when it was first come, first serve.
True.
So Kannapolis, Harrisburg, whatever could allocate much more than their percentage, and they had years where they did. They were allocating way above what they would have had as an allocated amount of flow.
The majority of this data is that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, all the data is
Essentially
essentially,
averaging back
All
down.
Right.
all the data is.
3 or 4 years behind in actual.
Yeah.
Construction and allocations.
That's a good point.
While it's working right now, I'm concerned that it's not going to work in the future. And I don't know why. I don't have enough numbers to say one way or the other is not going to work. But I have this.
Well, I think we're all, I think, thinking in the right line of thinking about making sure all the member jurisdictions are protected best we can. So I think everybody's hearts and heads are in the right place for that. So it may just be that we have to address this when it really, we did that tonight with the county issue, so maybe we just have to all pledge to keep doing that each year and make sure that the numbers are still working for everybody
Well,
best we can.
and will that happen, like Jonathan said, if we do the combination the next time, right? So is it the combination of looking forward and the looking back, and maybe that's where the correction comes in?
Could be, yeah, could be what's actually needed
Right.
for a host of reasons.
Thomas is in the real nuts and bolts of the master plan. Is that data that they have available in their projections to say where everybody would be at certain points in time based on their the internal projections of the jurisdiction?
Yes, sir. It doesn't, it's kind of aggregated by jurisdiction. So that there's not the really fine details readily available. They're all in there. Jake Petrosky has been doing this. Many of y'all know him, you know. He's been doing that. He's got all the fine details. So that's available. We just got the draft and we have just provided comments for the draft projections memo. Now, with that said, that is the same information that was presented to member jurisdiction representatives, I don't know, a month ago, maybe, Michael, is that something like that? So we did a Teams call and presented all that then. So it's just in report format now. But yes, that is,
When the report, when it comes out, we'll be able to see what the future projections are and actually calculate a percentage based on what they think they're gonna grow.
yes, sir. And this was based on methodologies from each member jurisdiction. Some were more aggressive than others with different approaches to that.
One more comment again, that we're getting ready to start into $18 million in infrastructure improvements, which I think Jimmy mentioned. For the rest of you, that's not a big deal. For us, that's 10 times more than we've ever spent. So we're positioning ourselves about 2 years out in position for some growth. And again, I appreciate and encourage the discussion that you're having. So we spend $18 million, the expectation would be a couple of years out, which we start to grow some, and then you put the brakes on and say, well, no more sewer allocation. We spent $18 million, which is badly needed because some of our infrastructure is almost 100 years old. But the expectation still with the board and the community is that we are going to start to grow some. So I've been slowly pushing that snowball uphill for 10 years, trying to get Mount Pleasant in a position to start growing some, because historically it's not happened, but we are trying to position ourselves now to start growing a little bit. Again, thank you for this discussion.
Refresh my memory on the debt service. Is the current agreement, does it link any of this to the debt service percentages?
Because there is no debt service.
Yeah, I mean, going forward, though, if we make changes to this, do we need, let's say there are changes to the percentages, shouldn't that be tied to the debt service and who pays for it? I mean, if Kannapolis gets 10% more all of a sudden, then our obligation for the debt service on creating the capacity ought to change, right? But I don't think that's where we are.
That's sort of what I did on the
Right.
sheet to
I
that.
don't think that's an idea, but it's not an agreement yet.
Right.
Policy.
No, I agree.
We
I
need to
think,
link the two, whatever we do.
I agree.
Concord shouldn't continue to pay 60% if you're getting in the next several years less than 60% of the capacity. I mean, I think that's fair. If Mount Pleasant gets a little more, they'll probably have to chip in more for the debt service on the plant expansions. So we just got to not lose sight, that link needs to be there to whatever form. All right, I think we beat this one up pretty good. Anything else on this topic?
I'm done.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that.
All right, sewer variable and fixed charges, Michael.
According to our sewer service agreements with the jurisdictions, we have to adopt or inform them of the rates by May 1st. So I'm asked that we go ahead and adopt the rates and charges for fiscal year 23-24. We'll wait until June to ask for full adoption of the annual budget. We'll be also adopting our system development fees and everything else that we are currently doing the 45-day comment period on. So I'm asking that the board approve increasing the rate from $1.636 to $1.766 per gallon, per 1,000 gallons. I'm sorry, it's a 7.9% increase. And the fixed charges are shown on the following page for fixed and variable. And that's going to the board approve those fixed charges, and I will send out the letter to the jurisdictions informing them of the rates and charges that the board has adopted.
Any questions for Michael on this?
Michael, the ramp up of those debt service payments that we talked about, have we abandoned the year one?
Well, I did some work on it. The amounts seemed pretty significant to try to squeeze in with this short time frame that we have right now before we adopt the budget. So I thought it probably would not be best. I did calculate if we did 50% this year and brought it up next year. It would have been significant charges. I don't know if you want me to discuss what it would have been.
No, just tell me you don't want to do it.
If it's significant, we don't want to do it either.
I wonder where you're going with this.
I'll just let you know.
But If we had had a couple of 2 or 3 years between these two debt issues, we could have a better planned a slope up of the debt service. But since we only have this 1 year, it's, and then the time frame short right here, I don't think anybody wants to absorb Concord and N3. That was 652,000 right here at the last minute. 227,000 for Harrisburg and 32,000 for Mount Pleasant here at the last minute. So we really don't recommend it next year. This year, we is gonna do a presentation later in the meeting about debt service that's coming up and what it looks like. There will be a significant increase on the 34 expansion debt. So just be aware that we were able to cover the 26.5 to 30 million gallon debt within the rate structure we have now, but there will be some significant charges increases next year.
So I do have a question for Jeff. How is it going for Midland? Are we talking about next year or the year after or what? If that you all are going to making the transition of part of your capacity to them and part of your service area to them? Do you know a date?
So we're still. I mean, the study is being done to basically have an ultimate recommendation from Raptelis on whether this is a sustainable endeavor at all. So we're still, nothing is for sure either way. I mean, I do think there is, both parties are interested in that transaction, but we still have to make sure it's a viable, business decision for everyone. But I would expect by this summer, we would understand for sure what direction we're obviously if the study says this is going to be horrible for everybody, it probably stops right there. But hopefully we'll be close enough that by summer we can know that the road we're going down. And obviously you got to talk about rates, you got to talk about asset transfers, and some of that stuff takes a little while to physically do.
Well, if that's the case, that's the beginning of the fiscal year, essentially, midsummer. Okay. What impact does that have on this? If they pull off in this fiscal year that we're planning right now, for this separation of services to begin to happen. So does that impact any of this at all?
Maybe.
Depends on how they structure it. Whether
That's a deep discussion we haven't.
Yeah, and
ventured down yet.
again, I think the expectation would be that if Concord has been given an allocation, and obviously we have a sewer agreement with Midland that right now covers 100% what their contribution to Rocky River can be up until a point of time. And what we're gonna have to understand is if that transfer happens, we're gonna have to unwind that agreement. And my expectation would be that the terms of that agreement may be what that allocation ultimately is, right? That you become your own utility and you take the allocation that we have already agreed to give you. And that's,
you're
potentially.
not saying they would actually start their operation in July 1st.
No, I think by summer we would know which direction, if we were fully headed down that
Or is
route.
it possible it would be by January 1st or something?
Doubt it.
It's the next fiscal year, so we don't have to worry about it in this fiscal year. That was the reason I was asking.
Yeah, I don't, it's probably gonna take a long time, depending on, there's the decision, obviously, and the negotiation of how that transfer and cost and all that stuff works. And then there's actually the ramping up of the physical, what Midland will need to bring on board to bill and hire and maintain their own system. So there's a lot of pieces after that decision is made. So it's probably gonna take a while.
So it doesn't sound like you're talking about it's going to affect this particular budget we're working on right now.
I would highly doubt it that we would be completely ready.
We'd have to enter into new sewer service agreements, pre-treatment agreements, all of the things that you've entered into with us.
Right.
Okay.
And we physically, we've got to build the vaults and the master meters and all that stuff. So there's a lot of physical stuff that has to occur as well.
Well, I think there's a central question. Do they get their treatment capacity authority through Concord or through WSACC? I don't, that's an open-ended question still, and that transfers into their responsibility for some of the debt. If it flows through this organization and not through Concord,
And that's where I was going with it too.
Very good point.
which we all have to figure that out.
Will they become members or they're just a contract
Right.
provider?
Topic for another day, sounds like. Okay. Any other questions about the rate fixed, variable and fixed charges? Is there a motion to approve the new charges?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion, is there a second? Got a second, any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Wendy, updated travel policy.
We'll talk about something different for a minute anyway. It's a updated travel policy. Our last one was just dated, so this brings, we're still doing per diem for meals, includes P cards. Sets the minimum for travel advances and like updates our reimbursement procedures. It does include a memo that we had that had talked about the hours, how you account for your hours when you're at conference. So that was a memo before, we just included it in the travel policy. And ask that you approve our new travel policy. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So this is all brand new.
It's a new policy, but we had one previous.
This replaces the old.
It was about 20 years old, so.
It's 97.
I'm assuming
Talk
get you
about
back in
payphone.
Well,
compliance with IRS.
it was still based on the TSA, that's what we're using, so that was an old policy, they're still doing per diem, so that's pretty much the same for us.
I looked through it, it looks good to me. Any questions or comments for Wendy? Okay, is there a motion to approve the new travel policy?
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? It carries. All right, Wendy,
Bad news.
let's talk about some big money.
Back to the expansion allocation, so, He's gonna bring up the power. All right, so these are the variables, and if any of these change, of course, that's gonna change your numbers up or down. Right now, our principal amount that we're estimating is the almost $90 million. That's based on, we have 7.8 that's already approved for pre-construction. 30% GMP is 135 million, which brings us to 143 million. And then after Charlotte takes their allocate or their part, and then we'll have about $1 million in debt issuance cost, and that's how we got to that 80 or almost $90 million. The next variable used was a 5% interest rate. I looked at what, right before our meeting, I looked at what was going before the board in April for the LGC. And it was really a wide range between 4%, and I even saw 6%, which made me a little worried, but most of it was between 4% and 5%. We're not gonna go to the, sell these until January, so a lot could happen between now and January. But using a 5% right now, I think it's a good estimate. It'll be a 25-year loan, which is what the normal is for the LGC, just for, I guess, just for our discussion here, I'm using the 5-year averages to allocate the debt payments. The LGC usually allows you to do interest-only payments during construction, so we'll have just interest payments those first 2 fiscal years and level debt service. So this means when we start paying our principal payments, that our interest, our total payment will be the same from year to year, just like your mortgages for your house. So the first couple of years you're paying less principal, and then once you pay it down, you're paying more principal at the end of the loan. All right, next. So our first 2 years, since we're going to be paying interest only, it'll be about $4.5 million on that $90 million. And you can see the allocation for your jurisdiction. for that $45 million, like I said, based on the 5-year average flow. And this will be into the addition of what you're already paying, of course, for your fixed cost. I guess I should have asked after that first slide. Anybody have any questions?
Wendy, I do have
Okay.
one question. How did you get 25-year finance? We've been trying to get that worked out for county
Well,
property.
they were trying to go for 30 for the courthouse.
Yeah, right.
And that's what the LGC wouldn't let us do 30 for the courthouse, but they did, I guess we went 20. I should know that.
That's what, that's traditionally is.
Yeah, 20 or 25, yeah.
I think it's common for revenue bonds for.
It's a little longer. than lobs.
We do lobs with the county though, so this is a different type.
Right. Different.
And we don't get revenue for the courthouse,
True.
unfortunately.
So this loan is based on the revenues that will bring in. For the lobs, it's tax and power. So this is the first 2 years, so you would see this in fiscal year 25 and 26. And then the next slide shows you 27 and thereafter will be approximately $6.7 million in total, since we have that level debt service for the remainder of the years.
So you said these are new dollars we need to come up with.
Yes, additional to what you're already paying for that. For meeting. And then the last slide, it's just a graph showing you the total revenue bond debt until we have it all paid off for these two in 2049.
This year Michael's retiring, I think.
102. He's not gonna make it.
I'd answer any questions that you have.
Questions for Wendy about a lot of money.
And that just gets us to 34 million gallons of capacity. Is that right?
A lot of growth to pay for this.
Yes, so you're looking at about $11 million when you get both principal and interest for both revenue bonds per year. We'll have our other debt paid off, which was minimal anyway, but we'll just have the revenue bonds.
And are we that we're still moving forward on trying to determine what the next step past 34 is, right?
Correct.
Are you envisioning that there will be some additional costs just for the analysis and everything that we're doing for the next project that will occur during these first 2-year period of time that you're at, that we might have to swallow some additional cost?
Correct. There could be, to get through your preliminary design type work.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too, because we're gonna be pushing hard to get that next one in place.
Is there any value in rolling some of that into this bond issue? Or is that? I mean, I don't know what those numbers, it's 2 or 3 million.
You have to get an estimate before January to include that with or really before that,
You can't really borrow money to get the estimate.
right?
We can upfront with our system development fees and reimburse ourselves back out of revenue. bonds.
Future revenue.
So not something we have to worry
Yeah,
about.
we got
We could have a reimbursement.
in reserve that we can kind of self-fund it and then pay ourselves back and keep it.
Yeah, because otherwise I'd say there's enough unknowns, the LGC.
Yeah,
There you go for adding that in here. So,
All right. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? As they say, it is what it is. Is Charlotte, how are they doing their own financing or
Right.
is it completely separate?
Yeah, they do their own revenue bonds. They issue hundreds of millions of dollars every year, so they just
Roll that into
roll
this.
it in as a little line in the.
Just a comma.
Yeah.
One extra zero is nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we will roll on. Chad, gonna give us a plant update.
Tell you what we're spending all this money on. Here, Crowder continues with lots of crews on the site. They've completed all the concrete pours for the aeration basin, and the large crane has actually been disassembled and removed from the site. Prep work is continued for the equalization basin concrete pours. think some forms have shown up on site. and
I
they-
think before the initial one on May 1st, it'll be
Yeah.
2,500 cubic yards.
Yeah. So that first pour will be coming up soon. Prep work, well, let's see, the maintenance canopy building has begun. They're erecting that building now. Continued work on the effluent flume, continued work on the blower building slab and began concrete placement. Continued excavations for box 101 and tying all that in. And like I say, every month, we continue to work on ways to mitigate our issues in this phase and going forward. A couple pictures here. This is actually up on top of the new aeration basin that we've seen being built for the last 9 months or so. You can notice there's actually water in these tanks. They've been doing leak tests on these tanks. Have all the walkways in, just don't have the permanent. We will have nicer railings than that done and move forward. Maintenance canopy here going up, being built. That should be, I would imagine that'll be completed. That structure will be completed by next month. Here's to give you an idea of how big this 5 MGD EQ basin will be. That's a lot of people standing out there working and kind of gives you a good feel of the size. So they're going to begin concrete placement, like Thomas said, here in the next week or so for that site.
So is that the entire floor?
Yes.
2,500.
Yes, sir. They have a ballast slab, that's the 2,500 cubic yards, and then they'll have the base of the tank will be poured on top.
Here, this is a picture of the effluent flume. Kind of hard to see what's going on here, but in the past couple months, there was just some subgrade type work done. So most of the concrete's been formwork stuff's been completed on this flume. A picture of the lower building. Yes, I did. They're going to continue working on that EQ basin. Like I said, with the concrete pours, continue work on aeration basin 6. Now that it's completed, once it's drained, there's lots of plowing has to be done within that. A lot of work there still to be done. They're going to continue working on the effluent flume, chlorine contact basins, continue work or hopefully complete the maintenance canopy. And continue to work on the new blower building to prepare for installation of that new building structure, which the builder that's building the maintenance canopy building the structure of the blower building. So once they complete that, they're going to be moving over to the blower building. So with that, any questions?
Seeing any relief at all on the time in order to get some of these critical parts in? Are we getting any improvements at all in that? Or are we getting any improvements in some of the cost estimates that we were doing?
I would say no and no on that probably. Definitely not on the cost. It does not appear to be working in anyone's favor there. We did the other week get some good news. We were on some of the electrical switch gear, even though we ordered that stuff a long time ago, is still critical path towards our completion date. They said they got good news on that. Looks like that's going to move things up a month or two. All that means is we get back closer to spring. It was looking like we were going to be more summer, late summer. Now we're getting back more, maybe closer to where the original completion date was. That all comes down to when it shows up. We've got electrical equipment, at Lower Rock River Pump Station. We've been waiting forever on. It's a challenge in that electrical transformer, switch gear, PLC, that whole world.
Chad, with this contract, if there is a delay, like if we get to the point where we know we're not going to make it, what contractually, how does that communication work? Do they officially notify WSACC that, hey, we know we're not, I mean, I know our board is keenly interested on the fluctuation of that completion date. How does that, I mean, I know a lot of this design build, you're kind of crossing your fingers a lot throughout this, but how does that process work? At some point, will they have to officially notify that they will be late?
Yes, yes. And it's one of the few contractors that I've worked with before that I actually trust their schedule. That they're not early on, our completion date, substantial completion date, I think was April, May, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it slipped about September at one point. And now they pulled it back several months back. So instead of being one of those that kind of hides the bad news from you, or says, oh, we're going to make it work, or we're going to figure it out, then I feel comfortable that they're communicating the risk to us real time. You're obviously putting your faith into another party there, but I do feel comfortable that they're being real to us. The challenge is with some of these providers, they can say it's gonna be there March 1. And what if it doesn't show up till June 1? You know, when you know to go to another supplier, it's 80 weeks to get one. You know, that's the real fear there is that you don't, there may be some things we don't know till we know, you know, whether it's gonna show up or not. And but I think everything's being done to try to mitigate that.
But we are gonna be able to allocate the club, whether it's
Correct.
finished or not. That's the positive. I want to mention phase 4. The GMP's coming up.
Correct. So we are working with phase 4 to get that moving as quickly as possible. We've got some draft information this week from them. It looks like it's going to be another 3 GMP packages, very similar to what we did here. Where the early packages will be more equipment based. Or the first one will be more equipment based, second one be equipment and some work based, and then the final will be the wrap up GMP. It does look like the initial GMPs are going to be a little bigger than they were last time. So we're working with them right now to really kind of fine tune those some. We're probably looking at that first GMP in August, second one, November, December time period, probably November. Then the third biggest one are like January next year. So just trying to give them as much flexibility with them. We've asked them, what can we do to help you guys with your schedule? And so it's really getting some of that duct line pipe, blowers, transformers, switch gears, that stuff ordered as early as we can. Then there is some actual work that they can begin. But that is the schedule is more driven by equipment right now and getting stuff in.
We're doing everything we can to overlap the construction and not miss a beat.
Correct.
Right.
So there will be actual physical phase 4 work beginning probably, especially by ordering equipment and getting things, POs cut and everything before this year's over. So 9 months or better, 6-9 months before phase 3 is done. And there will actually be dirt being moved on phase 4 before phase 3 is done. So that will be taking place.
Any concerns that they have about personnel? I mean, obviously, they got multiple crews was your very first point that you made here on the on the discussion. Are they, I mean, everybody I hear says can't find people. Are they having the same problems, or is it they've got a pretty good crew and they think they're gonna be able to keep them?
I think Crowder is historically known as a very good place to work that takes care of their employees and treats their employees right. We've asked that of their management, and they said that they're really not. They've had to increase their wages. I mean, their rates have gone up to their staff to keep people. I think I haven't heard, they haven't expressed staffing issues to us. And most of the subs that they utilize and we're utilizing on this project are subs. We very clearly let them know that time was of the essence. So we're going to get the subs on these projects that are the better subs that also have the better employees and treat their employees and hopefully retain their employees better. So that I don't feel like that's impacted the project at this point. I think maybe from some of the suppliers, maybe getting some product and stuff in it maybe, but I don't feel so with our contractors.
Any other questions for Chad?
Just a comment, I think I'd pass this on to Mike, although I saw a draft email that never got sent, but I think it'd be useful to have our meeting out at the plant at some point, probably maybe the August timeframe or September. I know we have to notice it and we have a lot coming up with the budget and public hearing and all that, but I'd like to have our meeting out there so we can see some of this in person.
Everybody agree with that?
And we think when they get the tank started, would be a good time. When they have part of the tank built, it'll be a good time.
You guys just schedule when you think is the right meeting. Let's just.
September may be a good time. Hopefully wouldn't be quite as hot.
Good suggestion. All right, any other questions or comments about the plan? Okay, we'll open up public comments. Any more public comments? Thank you, Mr. Holloway, for being with us. Hearing none, we'll close that portion. And do I have a motion to go into closed session pursuant to general statutes 143, 318, 11, A1 and A3?
So moved.
The motion All right, got a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?